The committee is resumed. Talofa lava. And honourable members, when we were last debating this in the committee, the Honourable Ruth Dyson was speaking to the bill, and she has 3 minutes remaining if she wants the call. I call the Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Talofa to you. First of all, I want to express my disappointment that despite acknowledging Samoan Language Week, you didn't acknowledge to the Senior Whip of Labour and other members of the House that it's also Haga Ginga Day, and you may want to take the opportunity before the House rises later on to address that with the many members of the House. Honourable Kate Wilkinson is smiling in anticipation of this, so I look forward to seeing to the Honourable Kate Wilkinson leading the queue to have that interaction with the Chairman. Mr Chairman, I'm really pleased to conclude my first contribution in the committee stages of the Social Security Long-Term Residential Care Budget Measures Amendment Bill by repeating my call that I made prior to the lunch adjournment to the Minister of Health, or indeed the Minister of Social Development, to take a call in this committee stage and explain to particularly the 170 current residents of residential care why the $4.5 million that they are being asked to pay this year is necessary. Why is it necessary for them to contribute that amount of money, given the range of other options that I'm sure both ministers considered? And why is that being described totally incorrectly by members of the National Party as the way of securing the long-term sustainability of the asset testing regime? Because it's not, Mr Chairman. In fact, what this does is fundamentally alter the asset testing regime, as was very appropriately commented on by Kevin Haigh in his earlier contribution in this debate. What it actually means is outlined very well in what I don't think is the greatest regulatory impact statement that I've ever seen, but perhaps it was because the officials didn't have very much notice to put it together, but certainly the fiscal savings, which is actually all the RIS describes, are very appropriately laid out. For a person who currently is under a contractual understanding that their asset threshold would be at $220,000, the CPI indexation would mean that it would be at $213,297, and that's with the assumption that there's a 2% increase in CPI from year to March 2013 and onwards. Mr Chairman, as I said, that's outlined in the regulatory impact statement. A lot of members of the National Party don't seem to think that this is a problem. You know, what does it matter if older people who are in a rest home have to have more assets before they qualify for this asset testing regime? But what it actually means for them, again according to the RIS, is that Mr Chairman.
I call the Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Mr Chairman, what it actually means for the average resident is that they will have to pay an extra $70 a day, and the difference between the current amount and the new amount is that they will not become eligible for the full income subsidy for 96 days longer than they currently would. Again, the National Party would say, well, older people are a problem. You know, what's 96 days? I've heard speech after speech in the earlier stages of this debate, the National Party members referring to older people as a problem. I find that offensive. And I also think that it indicates that they are totally out of touch with reality if they think that the additional 96 days of paying $70 per day isn't much. It's a lot. And particularly it's a lot when you face the harsh reality of the fact that the average stay in a rest home for older New Zealanders is now around 18 months. The brutal reality of this is that these people don't have very much longer to live. That's borne out by the facts. One would think, Mr Speaker, Mr Chairman, I apologise for referring to you in that manner, one would think that at most times, at all times preferably, but certainly at a time when people are ending their life, this would be the very time that they should be treated with the utmost dignity and respect. And instead, what people who are facing or living in residential care are being told is that without them having personally or through an advocacy organisation such as Grey Power, or an organisation such as Age Concern, or through their family members, without any opportunity for them to have a say to a select committee, the asset testing regime is being completely changed. The threshold levels are being effectively frozen rather than progressively increased so that the asset testing regime would completely phase out, as was our commitment in 2004 in the legislation, that at this time people are being treated with total disdain and disrespect. I find that offensive. I am really, really puzzled that neither the Minister of Social Development nor the Minister of Health, let alone the Minister who should be the Advocacy Minister, the Minister for Senior Citizens, none of them have bothered taking a substantial call and explain to people why this fundamental policy change, instead of having a progressive phasing out of asset testing, that we are now moving to freezing of assets, that we are doing this under urgency with not one single member of the public being entitled to have a say to a select committee. How can that be justified? If this is the answer to the financial situation that the government insists New Zealand is facing, $4.5 million being saved in the next financial year from older New Zealanders who are at such a high level of health need that they're in a residential facility, then heaven help the future of this country, Mr. Chairman. I think it's offensive that we do this sort of legislation under urgency when there is clearly no need. The only reason that the government could justify this legislation under urgency is if, failing this, on the 1st of July, we would fall over as a country financially. I don't think that $4.5 million is going to save us from that crisis if that's as bad as it can be. There is no reason for this to go through Parliament under urgency. Every older New Zealander should be saying to their national members of Parliament, how dare you treat us with such disrespect. I am sure they will. I have seen the press statements from Grey Power. I have had phone calls and email messages from different branches of Grey Power and indeed from Age Concern from around the country, people who are so upset that without any notification, without any justification, this has now been rammed through under urgency with the backing of the National Party, the Māori Party, the ACT Party and United Future. This was not part of the National Party's great plan for the future outlined during the election campaign. Not once did I hear my National Party opponent nor any other member of the National Party say, in order to get through the next 3 years, we are going to have to freeze the asset testing regime for older New Zealanders in rest homes or hospital level care. Not once was that mentioned.
I call the Honourable Member Dennis O'Rourke.
Well, that would have been